This is about the time when people used to trade human beings. Human beings were bought from the markets and kept as slaves. Strong slaves were made to do hard labor. When these slaves were seen to be weak and old, when they came, the slaves were exchanged in the markets. In Malik Canaan, there lived such a good-hearted man, Abdullah the merchant, who used to trade in human beings. One day this merchant took some of his weak slaves to sell in the human market. When this merchant reached the marketplace and taking his bid, thought, why not I also bid to buy this slave? While this merchant had 10 slaves and 4 horses. This amount was too much to buy one slave. When this merchant sold his 10 slaves and 4 horses, he also participated in the bidding. Traders came from far away to buy this slave. The slave that the big merchant had was this slave. He was describing many qualities of the slave and kept increasing the amount in exchange for each quality. The bidding continued for several days, but the merchant increased the amount of the slave every day. When the merchant asked about the qualities of the slave, the big merchant said that this slave is not an ordinary slave. I have spent a lot of money on this slave. When I bought this slave, he was a 10-year-old child. Taught this slave for 15 years, wrote and taught him military training as well as the dialects of many countries. When this merchant heard the qualities of this slave, he made a promise in his heart that he must have this slave. He will buy any amount of this slave, why not pay the price? Finally, after many days, the merchant bought one of the most expensive slaves in exchange for his 60 slaves and brought him home with him. When the people of Daras heard the news that Abdullah the merchant had bought one slave in exchange for 60 slaves. For several days, people came from far and wide to see this slave. The merchant gave the name of this precious slave as free. The slave said, my lord, if you trust me, then you will give me the authority to take over the responsibility of these slaves. Before that, the responsibility of taking care of these slaves was the responsibility of the merchant. The daughter had. The merchant did not set the slave free because he would also go to a market and sell the slave at a high price, but the merchant had this idea in his heart that knowledge itself is a great wealth. He did not make a bargain by buying a slave.